Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the author of Death is Wrong, an illustrated children's book on indefinite human life extension. I am also a transhumanist and a techno-optimist. And the key question for our panel of speakers today is, how can the majority of people become techno-optimists? What are the key approaches and opportunities for restoring an optimistic view of technology, progress, and the future among the majority of people, and to counter apocalyptic Malthusian and neo-Luddite thinking? So we have a distinguished panel today. Demian Zivkovic, who has appeared on 2 of my panels in the past, is a student of artificial intelligence and philosophy and founder and president of the Institute of Exponential Sciences, an international transhumanist think tank and education institute comprised of a group of transhumanism-oriented scientists, professionals, students, journalists, and entrepreneurs interested in the interdisciplinary approach to advancing exponential technologies and promoting techno-positive thought. Then we also have Philippe Castonguay, who is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in science and psychology while doing research in computational neuroscience. His main research topics are the influence of noise on the stability of chaotic neural network models, mechanisms of recurrent neural integration on a network scale, and high-dimensional data representations. Philippe is also an executive member of Bricobio, a DIY biohacking group in Montreal, and co-founder of Montreal Futurists, a Montreal group that wants to promote transhumanist and futurist ideas and prepare the population for the integration of related technologies in the society. We also have Sylvester Geltmeyer, a Dutch citizen and sound designer. He has been interested in transhumanism, science, and technology since childhood, when he was fascinated with science fiction and imagining a highly advanced technological world where every problem can be solved with science. He emphasizes the ability of science to help people, especially through medical advancements, and considers deep brain stimulation to be one of the most important inventions of our time. He hopes that technological advances will produce an era in which children can grow up without struggling with any learning difficulties or physical obstacles. Rowan Horn is a philosopher and lecturer on the importance of trying to live forever. He founded the Eternal Life Fan Club, an excellent activist organization, in 2012 to encourage fans of eternal life to start being more strategic with regard to this goal. To this end, one major focus of the club has been on life extension techniques, everything from lengthening telomeres to avoiding risky behaviors. Currently, Rowan's work may be seen in the many memes, quotes, essays, and video blogs that he has created for those who are exploring their own thoughts on this or who want to share and promote the same things. Like many other fans of eternal life, Rowan is in love with life and is very inspired by the world around him and wants to impart in others the same desire to discover all this world has to offer. So clearly we have an excellent group of techno-optimists here to discuss this question. And as a way of introducing it, I will note that there have been eras in the past in Western civilization where techno-optimism has prevailed, even, say, in the middle of the 20th century, despite all of the destruction wrought by World War II and the atomic bomb. The prevailing cultural attitude was one of anticipation of a brighter future. Great science fiction writers in the 1940s and 50s included Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and they continued to write also into the later decades of the 20th century. But they portrayed some of the challenges that emerging technologies could bring, but also the solutions to those challenges were also technological in their works, and they were able to create science fiction that still had conflict, that still had tension, but a predominantly hopeful view of technology. And yet we see a lot of strains in today's popular culture, in films, in popular discourse, that are essentially dystopian, that consider the prevailing thrust of technology to be for the worse. There are a lot of fears about artificial general intelligence. There are a lot of fears about, say, life extension leading to overpopulation or disparities between the wealthy and the poor, fears that I consider to be unsubstantiated, but a lot of people fall prey to Malthusian thinking, despite the fact that it has been debunked by many economists. A lot of people have embraced completely unscientific apocalyptic fears, the most noteworthy recent one being the scare that the world would end in the year 2012. So my question for each of you is, how can we restore a more hopeful view of technology that would then motivate people to actually pursue technological advancements in our world so that we can solve the very real problems we live with today? Demian, I will start with you.
Well, hello. That's of course a many-faceted question, and it's a very broad question as well, because we see that there are actually a lot of different trains of thinking. And when you look at the entire world, it really depends where you are, and it also depends on the level of education that people have and their general attitude towards technology and science is really, well, let me start at this. I think that it's a lot of people who aren't trained in scientific thought, in academics, that take over a certain view that actually comes from movies, from entertainment. And the reason that this attitude comes from there is pretty simple, because if you paint a dystopian view of the future of society, you're going to have entertainment with a lot of conflict, with a lot of emotions, and that's the kind of stuff that really sells, you know? So on this one side, you have like the entertainment industry, which really is out to sell products, and on the other hand, you have the scientific industry, which actually isn't spreading a dystopian view of things, because a dystopian future doesn't seem very likely from a scientific point of view. And I think that it has a lot to do with education, which kind of view you adopt.
Absolutely, and those are excellent comments. I do definitely agree with you that there's an incentive within the entertainment industry today to create dystopian science fiction as opposed to more hopeful science fiction. So let's see, Philippe, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Yes, so first of all, I think one thing we have to consider and take into consideration is the fact that, like every problem, it's not all solutions that are good, even if their consequences are good. So, for example, we mentioned the entertainment, or also education is a big factor in terms of people are not scientifically literate. So of course we could say, well, we could try to change completely the educational system, and I think that's necessary because I think there's a lot of flaws in the educational system. But unfortunately, this is a solution that is extremely costly in terms of time and investment, and it's very unlikely that it's going to substantially change in the next few 50 or 60 years even, like in a worldwide scale. So in my perspective, these global approaches are not the best we can take, except you can do, I'm just going to talk about the educational one. I think that something that would be very efficient and wouldn't change a lot of the system itself would be to only change for now the elementary school system. So the most important aspect that children have to learn is not necessarily facts, it's how to think and how to perceive the world. So it doesn't matter when you're in elementary school to learn about history, to learn about these things. The most important factor is you should show them how to investigate the world surrounding. So for example, you could have a very much flexible educational system for elementary school where students could for example, look into their favorite animal, investigate their favorite animal, and have discussion about, okay, who do you think is the strongest animal, or who would catch the highest prey? And they could do hypothesis, and they could like talk about it. And just the fact that they could investigate the world, even if they don't have some knowledge that are necessary for their future life, I think that would substantially allow them in the future, it would increase the chance of them being interested in science, because science is not one of the problem with science in education right now is a lot of people see it as a duty. Studying is a duty that is imposed by the system itself. So if you show them initially that learning is fun, and then after in high school you can have a more structured, at least they know that school is not just about having a structured way of procedure and very algorithmic way of studying things. And I think that's a huge drawback for science, because science is already at its foundation quite systematic. You have to be very precise. So children learn to be discussed by this, and I think that's a big factor. So changing only the elementary system, I think, would be not so hard to do and wouldn't change much. So that would be one thing we could implement. Well, to come back to my point, why I say this is that a lot of time people say, well, we should change complete this, for example, the economical system, and I think perhaps that's a good thing, but should we really focus on this point, because it's so hard to change that perhaps on the smaller scales we could have greater impacts that would influence afterward the whole system. So for example, entertainment is a very good point, and to go with what Demian said, of course there's a lot of dystopians in current entertainment, but probably that's mostly likely of the fact that movies are extremely expensive to produce. And I feel like in the future, in the next 20 years, CGI will be so popular that you'll see kind of an explosion of different people, access to create movies, good quality movies, just like books, for example. So in the future, you could expect much a broader kind of field of different types of movie that would probably have many not dystopian movies that will be very interesting. So this is for a more general class, and also another factor that is extremely important to take into consideration is that you have some people that are technophobic, that are not that you can convince by reason, but some you can convince them by reason. Some, for example, are already familiar with technology, and it's just because they think for now that, for example, overpopulation will be a problem, or that these technologies will lead to cancer or whatever. These are people that you could convince. And of course, these people, you have to take a very different approach from the people that are not familiar with technology and are like radical against science, because most of the time they don't have any understanding. I think we should consider them differently in terms of our approach to change these two specific groups. And even within them, there's a lot of different people, different type of people that you can convince differently. And what I think that personally the best way to make people techno-optimistic and to show them that science is interesting is really to take them by the hand and make them realize, make them discover some truth of nature. So there's a lot of videos on people, you know, having a stand on the street, and people are really amazed when they can, for themselves, state some hypothesis at first and then experiment, and they're like, oh wow, I never thought that would work this way. And I think a lot of times it's just that people don't have this aha moment, because either in the school they just completely dissociate themselves with their learning process, or because they never experience them in their daily life, because there's not a lot of times you can discover things on your own if you don't have the curious mind that science requires. That would be my general comments for now.
All right. All right, thank you very much, Philippe. So you touched a lot on areas of education, and we will definitely delve into that to a greater extent as the discussion unfolds. I would like to take a little bit of time to introduce our last panelist who has joined. Laurens Wess is a Dutch engineer and chief engineering officer at the Institute of Exponential Sciences. Furthermore, he is the owner of Intrafix, a company focused on 3D printing and software solutions. Aside from these tasks, Laurens is very interested in transhumanism, longevity, just about all fields of science, entrepreneurship, and expressing creativity. He is a regular speaker for the Institute of Exponential Sciences and is very committed to educating the public on accelerated technological developments and exponential sciences. So, welcome, Laurens. We are currently in the midst of a sequence of introductory remarks by our panelists on the central question of our discussion: how can we get more people to become techno-optimists, to be more hopeful about the potential of technology to improve our lives? The next person whose comments I would like to hear on this is Sylvester. Sylvester, what do you think about approaches that could convince more people to take a more hopeful view of technology?
Well, first, let me just start off with some text I once written, which was very inspirational, and I already showed it to you. I'm going to tell it right now. For some, the age of reason is too far. For some, the age of utopiazation will also be too far. But for idealists, reason is not just an accomplishment, it's development. Just like utopia isn't a place, it's a state of mind. So if we look at this, people who think as a dystopian already has that kind of state of mind. They already, well, it's going to get wrong. So the best thing is, to be honest, you don't have to know all the ins and outs about technology. You just have to use common sense. I think that by being generally open and embracing new technologies, we have a better chance of turning it into our advantage as humans than if we try to ban it or prohibit it. Those naysayers who try to prohibit it unwillingly turn it into forbidden fruit, and therefore it will work counterproductive to them, because with all forbidden fruit it will be eaten. And that's a metaphor, by the way. So I believe that if the technology is available, we as human beings are destined to apply that. In other words, people may use it, but always by choice of free will. If there are people who don't want to be a part of it, that's their business. So yeah, it's kind of brief, but that's what I think about it.
Sure. Yes, I completely agree with you. Prohibiting techno-fugitive, anti-progressive, and most consequences. Rowan, what are your thoughts on how to make more people, actually one of the key
Oh, you're cutting off
mission
there.
club?
Okay, I missed the last part you said. Say that again?
Oh, Rowan, what are your thoughts on how to get more people?
I think you kind of have a problem with your microphone.
Way. I do?
Yeah, you're cutting off. But it's okay. I get the question. Thank you, Gennady, for having this panel discussion. So one strategy I think we could employ is that to increase optimism of technology, we could try to decrease optimism of certain other things, such as, I think we have to appeal to people's sense of self-preservation. I think that's a powerful strategy. Like, people want to exist, and most of the world thinks they're going to exist in an afterlife. So if we can decrease the optimism as far as the afterlife, if we can, in a sense, if we can just lessen people's hope that there is an afterlife, if we could instill doubt in people, then I think that would automatically increase their optimism of other options of salvation, like a technological salvation. That's something we could do, and I definitely think it's important to appeal to people's emotions. An intellectual argument is not going to work on a lot of people. We're very emotional creatures, and that's why film and music is so powerful at affecting people. So we definitely need to increase the techno-optimistic media that people are exposed to. Like this new movie, Ex Machina. I thought it was very techno-optimistic. It actually, watching this Ex Machina movie actually made me jealous of artificial intelligence. So if we can have movies that would actually make people jealous of, an artificial intelligence and a future technology, like make people feel like, oh gosh, I wish I had that. I wish I had that. That's a way we could appeal to people's emotions. Like, we can appeal to people's sense of desire for future, for fun, just for existence. Like, we have to get people to think like, look, you have an existence now. Do you want to keep that existence? Well, then technology is a necessity for you. If we can instill the doubt in an afterlife, then people would start to see technology in a more optimistic light, because technology all of a sudden isn't just some novelty thing. It's a necessity for your survival, for your self-preservation. This is why transhumanism it's like religious, right? For a transhumanism, technology is our salvation. So if we can instill that attitude in people, put doubt in people that there is even an afterlife or even a God, then people would automatically be flocking to technology just to exist, because it's like an ultimatum. And another, it's like that's appealing to people's sense of fear, the core instinctive desire just to survive on that primal. We all have that. We all want to survive. And another way we can appeal to people's sense of emotion, a very strong emotion that we can appeal to, is guilt. Like, I like that Aubrey de Grey, he has this great lecture where he talks about that it's a sin not to help people, right? He's a sin not to strive to cure aging. And that is appealing to people on the sense of their own guilt. Like, if you're against life extension, you should feel guilty because there are 100,000 people suffering and dying from aging. So people need to feel guilty if they're against technology that would improve and save lives. Such as, I mean, there's a list of technologies. Artificial organs, or microchips can be implanted in the brain to help people with all sorts of diseases. And we just need to start give people a very optimistic sense about technology, and even see it as a necessity, and appeal to people's sense of emotions. And then we also need to give people reasons why the common tropes against technology are just bogus. So we can touch on that later, but that's basically my general thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Rowan. I hope you can hear me now. Can you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you touched on a lot of excellent points, and I'd like to elaborate on them as the discussion unfolds. I definitely agree with you that for many people, the belief in an afterlife is a kind of deterrent to fully embracing this life and attempts to improve it. Now, I wanted to ask you with regard to Ex Machina, the film, which I happened to actually watch yesterday. Do you really think it's an example of a techno-optimistic film given the ending? And I don't want to spoil the ending for others who haven't seen it, but what I will say is it seemed to me after I watched that film, given the ending, that a reasonable person could interpret it as a fearful message about AI. That is, even if you're a compassionate, empathic human being who tries to understand and appreciate sentient AIs and respect their autonomy, they can still harm you. That's what I got from the ending, and to me that's not exactly a techno-optimistic message. It seems to me to be a case of a film that, even as it tries to perhaps be a little bit more sympathetic towards AIs than some other films have been, it still has this strain of dystopian thinking in it. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. And I mean, I might be a kind of an exceptional person that would find this so, optimistic, but I found that I was very empathetic towards the main AI in that movie, and I also felt that, I was empathetic for her need to survive, and she ultimately had to do what she did. Maybe she didn't have to. She could have figured out another way, but she was very into survival, and so, and also the movie, like I said, it made me jealous of the AI, because there was a scene in the movie where it talked about that we're all just set for destruction, right? Like, it was the main guy was like, feel sorry for yourself, because we're all just, upright apes, and in the end we're set for destruction, just alluding to the problem of aging. And yeah, but I get what you were saying. I mean, for some people, maybe for the majority of people, it wouldn't be the ideal movie to instill an optimistic view of technology, for sure. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your thoughts on this, Rowan. Now, Lawrence, let's hear some introductory remarks from you on the question of how we can get more people to think optimistically about technology.
Well, first of all, can you all properly hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. Well, what I think is that it's indeed a very good idea to appeal to people's emotions, but I think that many people actually a bit of lack the inner drive to survive. or the true will to survive. What I've seen lately is that more people actually tend to worry about things that happen in the media and around them and in the world in generally. So what I've seen is that many people tend to worry about what's happening in Africa right now. But people worry about what's happening to the Amazon slowly disappearing from our world. So what I think is that it's important to show people that technology can actually be a solution for these problems as well, and to show them what the future holds for the entire Earth as one entity actually. So I think that if we are going to be, if people are going to appeal to other people's emotions on the area of technology and how it's going to help them and help the Earth in the future, I think it's important to focus on what people are actually focused on right now, instead of trying to alter their focus in, like was previously said by Rowan, to try to appeal to their to their feeling of guilt towards each other because they're not helping each other preventing from dying, because that also involves a large moral background, because well, to convince people that immortality or curing aging in principle would be a good thing would take a bit more. So I think that it's a more straightforward approach to focus on the emotional appeal of what they're dealing and concerned about right now. That's in short my what I wanted to add to this, because I think that it's a bit more efficient to focus on those fields.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts. So I think a good bridge in our conversation would be to the topic of education, because it was mentioned by several of you. Philippe, you talked about the importance of early education and instilling a love of science and experimentation and exploration in people. And I see that a lot of mainstream educational systems, public schools in many Western countries actually do a disservice to young children by giving them the impression that school is suffering, that they have to sit in these stiff, confining little chair desks and they have to learn exactly what everybody else learns, and if they are bright, if they are inquisitive, sometimes their curiosity gets stifled because the teacher believes it's not efficient to address it, or there are priorities like getting the kids who don't know how to read or who don't know how to count to some sort of level of rudimentary proficiency. And then, of course, the social environment in many schools today is horrible, with both physical and psychological abuse, bullying, a lot of suboptimality for kids, so they come to associate school with suffering. By the time they're even in their early teens, they may have been completely turned off of the acquisition of knowledge as an exciting pursuit rather than as a duty. Some of them power through it and decide, okay, I need to do this, this is important, I'll get better outcomes in life if I do this. But for many, this light of curiosity, this light of discovery is snuffed out. And one thing that I'm curious about is if any of you have ideas about how to rekindle that or prevent that from being extinguished, especially given the fact that we have so many emerging technologies of education that are free, online classes from the leading universities, even educational games that are becoming available that people could play for free and could realize learning, it doesn't have to be drudgery, it can be enjoyable, it can be fascinating. So anybody who wants to contribute some thoughts on this, feel free to do that.
YouTube is the solution for learning. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, this is amazing what we have access to now that's we never had access to before, and so we already have done so much. And like you said, educational games. It's just the possibilities are limitless, especially as technology continues to advance and more people have access to laptops. Like there's been projects that geared to trying to get laptops in the hands of every kid in third world nations look little small green laptops. It's just been amazing thing. I just love it.
Yes.
If I can add something to this, I think that online education is a very interesting way to compensate for a lot of things. But so far, and there's a lot of people that discuss about this issue, not issue, but this emergence of alternative education online, and it seems still that I don't think it's gonna change as some expected will. In the sense that even me, I do a lot of online education, and I think that the system is extremely interesting. But one of the factors that it requires some sort of discipline that most of the population are perhaps not ready to have. So just like most phenomena in the universe, population is distributed following a Gaussian curve. So we always have some people that will be very good at studying on their own, that will be at one extreme of the curve, and you'll have people that can study on their own at the other extreme of the curve, and you have most population in between. So games are a very good way to alleviate with that. But still, I think that school as a physical emplacement where child can interact is also a very interesting thing to pursue, because when you're young, it's not necessarily education, what you learn that is interesting, is how you learn. So it's really about epistemology. Children have to learn about how to think more than what they need to learn a specific topic. And social interaction is, of course, really interesting. I'm not saying that the way it's working now it's perfect, because, of course, you have bullying. But I don't think that every child has bad memories of their elementary school or high school. So in my perspective, you can mix both, but I don't think it's a question of choosing one or the other. These type of education are just different public.
Interesting thoughts. Now, definitely, I would say interaction with people, particularly people more knowledgeable than oneself, is a great boost to education. One major problem I see with educational systems today is how they segregate students by age, so that people are stuck with their peers, and 5-year-olds are with other 5-year-olds. And in the United States, it's becoming increasingly regimented. The age at which a person starts school or preschool becomes ever earlier. The school year becomes ever longer. And there are 12 grades, 12 numbered grades in American schools before people go on to college. Now it's an expectation for most people to have 4 years of college if they are to get a job that pays decently well. So they spend all of this time essentially in settings where their predominant interactions are with people of their age group of similar knowledge, if not lower degrees of knowledge and skill sets. Perhaps one improvement could be increase the interactions with older students or adults, people who are experts in particular fields. I'm reminded of the traditional humanist model of education that was, of course, reserved for the elite in Western Europe. But the idea is, say, a noble family would hire a private tutor who would be an expert in one or more disciplines, in rhetoric or philosophy or mathematics or music, and that tutor would interact very closely with the children of the noble family and teach them these skills, which were considered not just important as knowledge acquisitions, but important for living the good life, essentially, for being a well-rounded, cultured person. And of course, this is a kind of idealized portrayal, but if this model of education can spread to every human being, wouldn't that be wonderful? And wouldn't that give people a kind of critical thinking base and a self-motivation to then go on and pursue their own endeavors, their own learning of other disciplines and ideas?
I couldn't agree more. That's very true.
Can I tackle that?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, I think imagination or fantasize. As children, we fantasize. You know, we think of things, we imagine things. I think that is the most important thing needed in education. Why? Because, well, I was brought up with science fiction movies, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, and there was a time when you was telling people, you know, with such enthusiasm, that lots of things, lots of the technology you see in these movies, will come true. Most adults, not to be ageistic, but most adults, their immediate response would be, drop it because I don't believe such thing would ever happen. But now people are a bit more cautious to give such an answer, simply because they have witnessed so many things come true that we previously only seen in science fiction movies or novels. For example, we are now having this conversation on a video voice chat whereby we communicate with each other. In the film Back to the Future Part 2, correctly predicted internet video chat systems. So it's becoming a reality. Also in the movie I saw a flat panel TV, it's also become a reality. And there was something mentioned with a video game where you don't need your hands, or at least don't need some traditional joystick or controller. So to say that science fiction or fantasy or imagination is just science fiction in this time won't work anymore, because the human capacity and ability to reproduce the technology that can be found in science fiction or in their fantasy will come true, and time have proven. So that's basically the first thing that children need to be motivated about, is not to cut off their fantasies and their imagination, to motivate that. That's the first thing that is needed in education.
Absolutely.
And also they should be taught to consider every single possibility, right? That not to close themselves off to different things. But you're absolutely right.
Yes. I was actually thinking of the potential for emerging technologies like virtual reality environments, say using an Oculus Rift or augmented reality. Peter Rothman, whom I interviewed a few months ago, likes to call it mixed reality, with technologies like the HoloLens that can project holograms onto real-world surfaces. You could have, for instance, simulations of a historical time period or artifacts from that time period, or you could do a virtual science lab, and it could be a lot more immersive, a lot more gripping to the imagination than just listening to somebody deliver a lecture or reading something out of a textbook. So I definitely see a lot of potential there. Also, I think it's very important, Sylvester, the role of imagination, the role of having something that really excites you about the field, about what you're learning. And in my view, the very prospect of creating a hopeful future can serve as that motivation. The idea that these fields of knowledge can improve human life, all of these problems and the tremendous suffering that human beings still live with on a daily basis could be alleviated by the study of these fields of science and technology. I think that should be a tremendous motivator, and instilling that hope, overcoming defeatism, I think is a very important cultural message to send. So I'd like to hear anybody else's thoughts on that. Where does the defeatist impulse come from, in your view, and what are some good ways to overcome it? Demian.
Yes, the thing that I really worry about is this whole attitude in society where people are being taught that it's good to like accept, to let go, to not like be perfectionist, instead of people asking themselves every day, what do I think about the life I'm living and how can I improve it? And I think that it's a cultural problem. You know, you have like this view of life where people are being told it's a good thing, it's a wise thing to actually like teach yourself to deal with negative things in a way that you just have to like live through them, that you shouldn't waste your whole life trying to improve them, and that you should just take life as it is. And I think that's a very negative message that people are being taught, that it's a very toxic way of thinking, and like it's almost being passed as wisdom to be conservative and negative. And I think that it's also a very important thing to actually show people that there are better alternatives, to show people how trying to improve things has already improved the world. How it was a good example about the video chat, that things are actually going ahead and that you can keep making them go ahead, and give people actual examples of how technologies which are still in its infancies can actually affect the world, make it less theoretical for them. I mean, when I talk to someone about things like transhumanism or exponential sciences, I don't just say, you know, like, we can improve the world, we can make lives better. I actually give good examples.
Yes. Specific examples.
Yes, very specific examples about how you can combine certain technologies. Like this last Friday, I was with a friend and a colleague, and I was actually talking about how you can combine technologies like artificial intelligence and neural interfaces to like make perhaps in 20, 30 years a device which could compile fantasy to experience. And this would actually allow us to create an utopia, to like, you know, you could think something, and through neural interfaces and sensory augmentation, you could actually experience what you wanted to do. And when you put it like that, when you make it very concrete for people, you actually you can get people excited. And when people say, you know, like, that's impossible or that's never going to happen, you can just show them technologies in their infancy and explain how these could be used and developed further to make something really fascinating.
If I can make a small rebuttal, I think what you said is very interesting, but it doesn't address the problem of defeatism, in the sense that if you show someone a knife, some people will say it's useful for cutting vegetable, but some people will say you can kill someone with it. Same thing, for example, with artificial intelligence. Some will point the medication, and some will point scan it. And same thing with fusion, nuclear fusion. Some people will say unlimited energy, and some people will point Hiroshima. And for every single good case of technology, there is always someone that will point the same technology that could be used for a bad reason, or that is used for a bad reason. So I think that it's interesting to propose good technologies, but I feel like defeatism is much more cultural embedded, and it's not by only giving examples that you'll be able to prevent it or remove it from society.
Well, of course, I'd like to answer to that. One of the most important things about doing this is framing. You know, most people aren't actually, aren't actually thinking in a scientific way about how these technologies will develop. They have this view that, like I said in the beginning, comes from dystopian media and other such sources. And when you actually come with, you know, examples which are realistic, which come from actual science, you often give examples which are very different to the future that many people think is going to come. And when you give solid reasons why these dystopian views are actually, you know, media, you can frame the future in a positive light. And sometimes it may even be useful to actually just focus and present a more positive view than is realistic, because, you know, many people are very sensitive to the way we frame things. Yes, I'm sorry, wait, give me a moment.
Can I tackle this?
Sure.
I think, of course, there are more types of people, but I think in general there are two types of people. There are people who have a solution of every problem, and there are people who have a problem for every solution. So basically, a lot of these people who have a problem for every solution, it stems from a belief system, especially the Unitarian religions. and they have institutionalized monopoly, let's say power structure, based on a symbiosis of death and life, suffer and joy, fear and hope, hate and love. So when the first mentioned becomes obsolete, complete obsolete, death, suffer, fear and hate, the means that control and make each other submissive will have no power anymore. It will only leave out life, joy, hope and love, what gives humanity more freedom of movement, and therefore the structure shall lose its power and crumble completely into oblivion. I think it's, if you can show it to people, we have life, we have joy, we have hope, we have love, we have the solution, they will become optimistic.
Yes, I think... Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add one small thing to this, and that is that I don't actually believe that it's necessary for everyone to actively become optimistic, because I think that many people live very day-to-day lives, and if you design products which you can market in a very hip, trendy way, they will buy them. Just like, you know, you had smartphones, you had the iPhone, you had plastic surgery in the past, which seems to like a much more radical treatment than, you know, genetic therapy or other such technologies. You know, taking a pill is much different from, you know, actually going through surgery. And I think that's, you know, marketing and making this very popular is something that's a lot different than actually changing people's view of the world.
All right, Lawrence, did you have something you wanted to add to this?
Yes, I did. Well, what I think is that it's people often tend to think negatively about new technologies, but I don't think it's actually because of the technologies themselves. I think that people mainly distrust well, people and what other people will do with such technologies, such as atomic energy. Well, of course, that could be used for weapons, but it could also be used to produce energy. And it's mainly people's fear that new technologies will be used for evil. And what I think is important to address is to show people how technology can improve the future, but it can also improve cultures. And because if future technologies are able to solve huge global problems such as well, shortage of food, poverty, and such, then that may surely transform entire cultures into a far more positive culture. And if that's the result of such technologies, then there's less reason for them to distrust other peoples and to distrust what other people may do with new technologies.
Absolutely, and I do think the question of trust is an important one. A lot of the criticisms that have been leveled toward emerging technologies are along the lines of, oh, some people will abuse them, like somebody will 3D print guns and will create a crime spree, even though I don't think the 3D printing of guns would lead to anything of the sort. Or with indefinite life extension, only a few elites will have access to it and they'll live much longer than the rest of us, and they will become dictators who live forever and create armies of their clones. A lot of people have actually expressed those thoughts, as absurd as they might seem to us. One thought that I wanted to develop a bit expands on what Sylvester has said with regard to how religions have often taken advantage of the mix of joy and suffering in life. And it seems to me religious frameworks have often portrayed both joy and suffering as a kind of inextricable part of the whole package of life.
Symbiosis.
Yes, that you can't have one without the other, whereas the transhumanist view is one that technology has the potential to progressively eliminate sources of suffering and of genuine physical harm to human beings while leaving the elements of joy in place and helping us expand those elements of joy and happiness and prosperity and fulfillment. So this is a major way in which the two visions conflict. One says You have to have suffering to have joy, and in many cases, various religious thinkers have said you have to have death in order to have life, whereas transhumanism says, no, this is not the case. You can get rid of anything that's undesirable and harmful to human beings while keeping and augmenting everything that's good. And I think emphasizing that central point, that this is a much more attractive value system for people who actually want to live better in this world and this life, and this is attainable right now. I liked what Demian said about specific examples, especially giving specific examples in some sort of concise manner that could say, oh, you fear X, but technology Y is here or about to be here, and it can alleviate X. Say a good example, some people fear running out of productive land for agriculture, but if you have vertical farming, which is already becoming available in some cities, you don't need to worry about arable land. You can essentially create it. You can create as many stories of it as you want. So one area I wanted to get your thoughts on as well is entertainment and different media of entertainment. This has already been addressed. Movies tend to be very high budget productions. So right now, to have a good movie with CGI and large distribution, the filmmakers have to spend millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Writing a book is easier. Anybody can sit down, if they have enough time, write a book and get it published. So do you see, let's say, lower tech methods of communication, including, say, writing of fiction that is more hopeful, to have a chance of turning around cultural attitudes? You might have the big budget productions still be dystopian for a while, at least until the computer graphics technology becomes accessible to everyone. But then you also have any techno-optimist who wants to being able to write a short story or a book, whether it be fiction or non-fiction, that illustrates a more hopeful perspective. How impactful do you think that could be?
I think it could be very helpful. I mean, any media we have, and any celebrities that are techno-positive, or any movies and film or art, it all helps. But I'm going to also mention a little bit about fatalism, because I wanted to add just something on that. We should also mention that most of the world thinks that an Armageddon is coming. So most of the world is religious, and the fatalism is coming from their own religious views, which is that God's going to destroy the earth, and it's all as part of God's plan. So if we can promote a secular culture, I think that in itself can help to end a lot of fatalism. And yeah, there's just this attitude that if you talk to religious people, there's this attitude that technology is humanity just reaching too far. It's kind of like they compare it to the modern day Tower of Babel. You know, like we shouldn't be playing God. And so there's just that. And even, like, you know, specifically mentioning technology as being antagonistic, like microchips as being the mark of the beast, right? That's just a specifically negative attitude on technology, specifically coming from religion. So I just wanted to mention that. I guess that's all I have to say about that right now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your thoughts.
Well, I certainly think that certain interpretations of religion can lead to this kind of thinking, but I also think that religion can be interpreted in many, many ways, and I think it might be easier to actually reach out to religious people than to, you know, try to secularize everyone on a short term. And I also think it's much easier to reach out to religious people through religious people, to have actual people who share their religion, to share another interpretation of it with their peers. For example, I have a friend which is a conservative Roman Catholic, but he also believes in technology. He actually said to me, I believe in Jesus, and Jesus came back from the dead, and Jesus also told us to follow him. So that could be interpreted as a call for life extension. And he said, like, God said that life is a gift, that it's something good that should be preserved. And if you try to convince religious people in that way. You may even be able to use their feeling of religious duty to, improve the world in this way.
I think that's a good point. That is to say, we could find some allies among religious people who are more technologically inclined. I'm thinking back in history to the Russian cosmists, most of whom were Orthodox Christians in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, but they advocated life extension, and they had a kind of religious motive. They were thinking they were doing the work of God in bringing this kind of divine order to the universe. Also, I'm thinking of the Mormon transhumanists, who are very active today and actually have a very effective organization. They believe that Mormon theology essentially urges them to become more godlike, and the best way to do that is through technology. So there are different strains, and I recognize that. It seems to me religion is a kind of lagging indicator of societal attitudes. That is to say, predominant views among religious individuals today are not what they were 50 years ago, they're not what they were 200 years ago, and they certainly were not what they were at the time of a given religion's founding. So, for instance, in the 18th century and early 19th century, most mainstream religious denominations in the United States defended slavery. It was in the Bible, it was part of the natural order. God had essentially ordained for some human beings to be the masters of others. Some religious sects, typically more radical ones, more forward-thinking ones more aligned with the Enlightenment principles that were emerging in the 18th century, thought, no, slavery is an abomination. If you take a different, more kind of humanistic interpretation of Christianity, that all human beings are equal before God. So you had Quakers, you had a lot of radical Protestant sects who were abolitionists in the early 19th century. So perhaps a useful question would be, given the fact that religion is here, it's not going away anytime soon. Some people might become secularists, but a lot of people will stay religious and won't want to abandon the cultural connections that brings with it. How do we get more religious people to think hopefully about technology and to accept, say, genetic engineering or artificial intelligence, or even, say, autonomous vehicles, the way most of them accept antibiotics and heart surgery and railroads and air travel?
Can I tackle that?
Sure.
Yeah. First of all, I think I want to tell something just about the medical technology right at the moment. I'm going to tell something personal first. I have scars from third-degree burns. When I was 1 year old, I had an accident. I also have dysthymia. It's in my case a mild depression to severe depression. And to top it off, I also have dyslexia and dyscalculia. Together, this is simply an unpleasant combination. So, if science is getting more advanced in the medical treatment, then we can heal a lot of things that are, basically stagnating ourselves. For instance, now we come into an age that is so advanced in the medical world. For example, they have it's called the skin cell gun, also known as the skin gun. Is a medical device that sprays a patient's own self-donated stem cells, to treat burns and other wounds. This is marvelous because in the near future, this device can be used to assist people with the healing process. Also, my uncle has heart problems. So, and there's another device called the artificial heart. For example, the artificial heart can replace the real heart that is weak. The first designs required an external battery pack, and it needed to be recharged once in a while. But I can tell you, probably in a distant future, we don't even need an external battery pack. It will be completely obsolete simply because the technology keeps on improving. And however, how religious people are, they always have this tribal instinct to survive. They will substitute to survive. They will have a bypass when they need it for their heart. They will have a deep brain stimulation when they need it for their mind, or 3D print new bones. Actually, religious people will opt technology if it is in their advance. It always will be so.
Yes. Excellent insight, Sylvester. Demian, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I actually wanted to say that I often see religious people that to actually want to live more than many secularists. Many secularists have actually made peace with death, while the religious people are often religious because of a deep desire to live forever. You know, religion promises them an afterlife. Religion gives them hope, while many atheists have a much more depressing or defeatist worldview. And I, as an atheist, of course, do not share this, and I look forward to a rational solution to these things. But I actually find myself to have more in common on these issues with some religious people than with many atheists.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Damian, and I can see where you're coming from. There is, in my view, a disturbing trend of some common, let's say, atheist groups, some prominent atheists stating that essentially the whole idea of indefinite life is inherently a religious one, and that living forever would be a horror, and that essentially death is normal and natural, and people should somehow take consolation that they are essentially returning to being particles of the world from whence they came. And I have seen a lot of commentary to that effect by some prominent atheists. Thunderfoot, who is a big name among the YouTube atheists, has essentially lambasted indefinite life extension. Sam Harris, Rowan, you gave me this quotation by Sam Harris, who said, the good news of atheism is that nothing happens to you after you die. So he said, death is not the problem, life is the problem. And to me, of course, it's exactly the opposite, that the fact that the individual ceases to exist is the worst fate imaginable. So it's an interesting question. We do have a trend of secularization in our society, but how do we stop people from throwing out the metaphorical baby with the bathwater? If they reject the idea of an afterlife or a supernatural, how do we get them instantly or very quickly inspired to pursue indefinite life in this world rather than making peace with death and embracing the ephemeral? Anyone have any thoughts?
Oh, I can tackle it, but if somebody else wants to speak, it's also
I guess I think I would just, appeal to their sense of self-preservation. Like, this is your existence. Like, don't you want to keep on existing? And their desire to have fun and pleasure. And as far as like religion, how to help religious people, we could always. I think doubt is so important. Put doubt that even if you do believe in a God, okay, you don't know God's plan. Don't pretend to know that God doesn't want, all this advanced technology and to cure aging and even microchips implanted in people's brains. Like, you don't know. It's all hypothetical. And so that's one way we can tackle the religious argument. And I just want to say about the atheist, the modern atheist, I totally, completely agree that I totally have much more in common with religious people in the sense that they want eternal life. Like, most religious people are at least fans of eternal life, where I can't even say the same for most atheists. Most atheists they're completely fine with dying and ceasing to exist, which I cannot understand. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Philippe. Philippe, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, if I can address something, you said earlier also, Rowan, that we should try to focus on the doubt of afterlife. So try to convince people that believe in an afterlife that might not be the case. And I think that attacking people and their belief is probably the less efficient way to convince someone. And it tends to polarize people by attacking on a personal basis beliefs that are so fundamental for their life. So my approach would be more kind of an implicit way to show them that maybe there's an afterlife. That's fine. If you want to believe there's an afterlife, that's fine. But what about this life? You can have both. Let's focus on this life as long as possible as you want in the best manner possible, and after you can go with your afterlife. That's no problem. So I don't think the people that believe in afterlife are less scared than people that don't believe in afterlife of death. I think everyone, from whatever your background, is probably scared of death. So I don't think that it's going to increase the number of people that will be pro-technology if you put doubts into them. I think it's going to create maybe the opposite of like some people like ISIS, where we try to impose our belief on them and they just radicalize on the opposite scale. So that's perhaps just for attacking people on their personal belief. And also on the opposite side. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, go, keep on going. Sorry.
Okay, it's just the other arguments I wanted to say is that yes, it's true that a lot of atheists don't have this really strong desire to survive. So for myself, I really enjoy life. I am in love with life, actually. I don't want to die. But if I happen to know that in the last hour I'll die, I'll be peaceful with it. I'm not going to, if there's nothing I can do, that is not something that scares me in the sense that I know there's nothing after. Of course, it doesn't mean I want it. The thought of it is not really appealing at all. I want to live as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's why I think that we have to consider different perspective, that some people are fine with dying, some people aren't, and I think that's really distributed along the population, and I think that from whatever groups you are, you'll have always people that will be extremely scared of death, some people that will be okay with it, and some people that might not care, not think about it.
I'm going to comment on that. So actually I've interviewed a lot of religious people. I have this series of videos I've been making called Eternal Life Fan Conversations, and believe it or not, one of the main reasons that people do not want life extension technology, or they're completely ambivalent about curing their own aging, is because they actually are looking forward to dying and going to heaven, and they actually want that to happen sooner rather than later, and they don't want to have to kill themselves, right? So they're actually kind of happy that there's this natural force that's going to kill them for them, and therefore remove that hard decision of having kill themselves. But religious people, most of them that I've talked to, are completely they don't have a fear of death, because when you really believe that you're going to get an afterlife and you're completely convinced of that, and I'm not saying that we should attack their beliefs, but we should attack their actions. Okay, so a religious person might believe there's an afterlife, but let's attack their suicidal ambivalence regarding trying to develop the cure for aging. If you're against life extension, or if you're just ambivalent about it, ultimately that's a suicidal attitude, and it's suicidal actions which I would like to judge.
Yes, I agree with you, Rowan. Actually, my approach in persuading individuals to embrace indefinite life extension and other emerging technologies has never been a deconversion approach. I have never said, for instance, you should stop believing in a God, even though I am an atheist and I am happy to explain and defend and justify my atheism. But instead, what I have tried to focus on are areas of common ground. Most religions will say suicide is immoral, as you mentioned. And actually, it's an important survival mechanism for a religion to be able to say that, because if it posits any sort of afterlife that is better than this world, it would lead a lot of people who sincerely believe that to say, I should look forward to that. I should look forward to artificially shortening my life. And then if there's a prohibition on suicide, that kind of puts a brake on it, saying, no, you can't just hasten it yourself. But on the other hand, this process of senescence that occurs to everybody right now is essentially a way for them to get there and to make peace with it. What I take issue with in this kind of thinking is that it does lead people to make peace with death. Most people fear death, even if they say they don't. And they have feared death from the moment they learned about it. But there is this powerful complex of ideas that have evolved over millennia when death really was inevitable to try to get people to make peace with it. Every major religion that has gained a significant following has tried to do this as a way of giving people comfort or giving people hope of another existence. But it doesn't have to be a religious ideology. It could be the Sam Harris version of atheism. It could be an attitude that a lot of the environmentalists and neo-Luddites take, that, oh, death is natural, it's part of the way things are, you shouldn't mess with the natural order. So my question to all of you, since we've discussed that it is possible for religious people to be friendly to technology, and it is possible for atheists to be unfriendly to technology, it seems to me there's something else that's more fundamental than a particular brand of philosophy or religion that one embraces that leads people to think differently on this. And I'll take this even further. Say the philosophy of objectivism, which is supposed to be a philosophy that embraces reason and life in this world and rational self-interest and trying to fight for your life and your well-being. I have met a lot of objectivists who have really denounced the idea of radical life extension, and they've given various, I would say, flimsy rationales for it, but the fact that they were objectivists didn't stop them from espousing death as thinking. So what is it that's more fundamental than whatever name one chooses to attach to one's philosophy or belief system that leads people in either direction to embrace life extension or to oppose it?
Can I tackle this?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I think, well, first we live in a difficult time where ethnocentrism, tribalism, religiocentrism influence the hearts and minds of humanity. And to overcome this, we must let go of group thinking and embrace humanity as a whole. Because there is more that unites us than divides us. It's basically what it is. Also, I recognize that I try to make a separation or a difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is for spiritual discrimination. This is a psycho-spiritual dogma or convention, and in its core it's religiocentric and therefore dehumanizing. Let's put it simply, it deems believers spiritual superior above non-believers. Spirituality, although some is superstition, some is not, or some they are not really, is not. It's just energy is energy. That's it. You know. So I just to say, I try to make a distinction between those two. Religion is discriminating. It is. I don't know why the UN, the United Nations never saw this before, because religion is discriminating. And I don't know why they have special rights, because they are violating rights. Spirituality is just a paradigm. It's just, I believe that there is some energy and I believe that it controls everything. That's it. So I try to make a distinction between those two. That's the first thing that needs to be done. We need to recognize a distinction between those two. I also believe if you longevity, or to say at least eternal life, in combination with the enhancement of intelligence, enhancement of a mental capacity, and enhancement of well-being, human well-being, better our lives in terms of healthy condition, emotional stable, and so forth, I think we are simply destined to do that. Everybody try to have a better life. It's just in the pyramid of, what was his name again?
Maslow.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Whether you're religious or not, everybody try to better their lives. We are just destined to do that. It's unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the motivation to better one's own life, I do think, is a motivation that crosses specific ideological persuasions. So I would say most people want to do something to improve their lives tomorrow. This is actually Aubrey de Grey's argument on the margin for why people should support life extension. If their lives are pretty good today and they feel like they're fulfilling their goals, they're enjoying their lives, then are they going to want to be alive tomorrow? Probably. So they shouldn't be making judgments about how they're going to feel 100 years from now, as long as they can keep their quality of life at a pretty good level. They shouldn't be saying, oh, I wouldn't want to live past X years. But I know that a lot of people wanted to opine on this question of what is it that's more fundamental than a particular set of convictions that distinguishes people who support emerging technologies from people who oppose them.
I'll take a turn at answering this
Sure.
question. Okay, so the motto from the new movie Ex Machina is that there is nothing more human than the will to survive. So I think the fundamental difference here is a lack of the people who don't want to live forever, and it's a lack of the most important human quality, which is a survival instinct. I think it's just that different. It's like comes down to evolution, like the survival of the fittest. The people who don't want to live forever are just simply not as fit. They are lacking some crucial element to what a human should have, which is a survival instinct that wants to just keep on existing. And so I think that is the fundamental difference. It might just simply boil down to some people are fans of eternal life, some people aren't. And I would say the people who aren't a fan of living forever, they just don't appreciate life as much as someone who does want to live forever. And it's a very simplistic kind of thing, but sometimes the truth is just really simple like that.
So Rowan, let's delve into this a bit more deeply. Let's say there is this survival instinct. Some people have more of it than others. Where does it originate? What leads one person to have more of it than others? And furthermore, can this be something that is affected by other influences through persuasion, through education, through entertainment, through other factors in life, that if we could tweak those factors in some way, we could motivate more people to have a stronger will to survive and therefore be more techno-optimistic?
Yes, I've thought about this a lot. And I think that the prime reason that some people, it comes down to the love of yourself. The more you love yourself, the more you're going to have that instinct to survive. So the difference between the people who want to live forever and the people who have accepted their own death, I think it comes down to the people who have accepted their death have a diminished love of themselves. And people, they have a self-hatred. And there's a philosophy that says that some people have a death drive. I forgot what philosopher came up with this idea. It was maybe Sigmund Freud. That there's a death drive, and I think the people who don't love themselves enough, they have a heightened capacity for that death drive. It's like kind of a death wish. Like they hate, like almost like I think there's a self-hatred that people have, and I think the self-hatred comes. And this is the key. Self-hatred comes when you don't follow your own conscience, right? When you disobey your own moral compass, you tend to hate yourself. And so I think that there might be actually a moral difference between the people who want to live forever and have that extreme survival instinct versus the people who have accepted their own death. The people who have accepted their own death, what I'm saying here is that they might have a self-hatred caused by a betrayal of their own moral guidance system. Like,
can I add something?
Sure.
That's something.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is that the will to survive is only part of the problem. What I think is also important to note is that people have a different view of what a life actually is. Because, well, what's also the case is that extending human life has only become possible in the last few years or a few decades. Before it was seen as an inevitability. But what I think is that, well, many people actually have a very potent will to survive. I mean, even the people who eventually accept their own fate and well will eventually just pass away, often have a very strong will to survive during their normal, what they consider normal lifetime, such as people fighting cancer. Well, you can bet they're very motivated to survive, but eventually, because they have this well, from my point of view, warped view on what life is or what a life should be. Well, after a normal human lifespan of about 80 years, they simply accept what they previously considered inevitable. What's the word?
Inevitable.
Yeah, inevitable. And I think that's one of the main underlying differences between people who eventually accept their death and people who want to live forever.
Absolutely. I'm just gonna add something to that. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like a lack of ability to open your mind to every possibility. A lot of times, it's just a closed mind that sees death as an inevitable thing because that's what they've been taught from a young kid, something like that.
Yes,
yeah,
I think
it's also a difference in what they consider to be natural.
Yes, so you hit on a good point, Lawrence. What is considered to be a normal lifespan, a natural lifespan, that in itself is an evolving expectation. There have been eras in history where somebody who was 40 was considered quite old. Because relatively few people would live past 45 or 50. And so somebody at 40 was already at the end of his life, at least not considered young anymore. A lot of people at 40 today would still perceive themselves to be young. Right now, somebody at 65 would still not consider himself to be, let's say, a senile old individual, whereas, say, even 60 years ago, 65 was seen as a very advanced age. I think a lot of this is a function of what the prevailing life expectancies are. That's a function of the medical treatment that is available. But I think a lot of it is also the ability to imagine a different possibility from that which prevails around us today. And Rowan, you had discussed how a lot of people are not open to different possibilities, and they should be more open to the future looking differently than it does today, for lifespans to be longer, especially if one is young today, like all of us are. We have a genuine chance of surviving to a time when 80 would be a really young age compared to what is possible with the medical technology of that time. So there's this mental flexibility, I think, that's important to overcome that status quo bias. A lot of people still think the way things are around them today is the way they've always been and they're always going to be, because they're ignorant of history and they lack the imagination to see the future. So I would invite thoughts from you on how we could change that outlook for people to say and recognize that the status quo is just a fleeting phase, that the future is going to look different and the past has been different. Sylvester, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think a lot of naysayers, I call them naysayers, right? They think if we apply these technologies upon ourselves, that we kind of disturb the balance and the equilibrium. But that's just because they don't have the imagination. For instance, one of the arguments was, for if humans can live forever, and at the same time we keep reproducing, how do we find a way to give the population, humankind, balance? But in terms, can humanity use this technology? Obviously, of course, we can use it. It's not really a question if we can, because if we can, we as humankind will use it. It's more a question, if we can use it, how do we balance it regards to human populace? And that's a question that needs answering and should not be overlooked. Will humankind solve this problem? Obviously, of course, they will. Humanity can achieve greater things by just imagining it first, then see a problem, then solve the problem, then apply the theory, ID, and then the inventions. So basically, a lot of naysayers say, well, if you do that, you disturb the balance, and that's probably one of the most reason why they say nay. But the thing is, with technology, you can actually get the balance back again.
Philippe, you wanted to say something as well.
Yes, and I think it's gonna take a little bit from everyone, especially from Lawrence. The last thing he stated was that people say it's not natural. And I think that all these things that were previously mentioned by Gennady, most specifically, is that people are stuck with the mindset of seeing the world as a static system where things don't evolve, and they should naturally stay this way. If things are this way, they should stay this way. And I think the most fundamental question that we should try to change people mindset about is what is natural. And people should see life and ideas and technologies as a natural process in the universe. If the nature came up with us, we are an extension of what nature is. It's not a dissociation. And also, compared to what he said, that things are not balanced, if we had a new technology in the system, that comes also from the mindset. For example, it's the same type of argument that says, yes, but resources are finite, and all these arguments along these lines where people assume that the world will be, they only perceive the addition of this technology without any other modification in this system. That's, I believe, where the big problem is coming from.
Absolutely. The static way of thinking about the world, it's very much a complement to the status quo bias that I mentioned, the failure to perceive existence as a very complex but very dynamic system. Actually, for a very concrete recommendation of how to overcome that, including at a very young age, I remember when I was a kid, I played every game in the Civilization series, starting from Civilization 1. And that really teaches one, even as a young child, about how dynamic life and human technological progress are, because you start with a society of hunter-gatherers, and you essentially guide it to develop technologies all the way up to the space age. And while I was always a bit disappointed that the Civilization technology tree didn't go much farther beyond the technologies that were available at the time those games were released, I still got the central lesson that, yes, there is technological progress that can radically transform the world, and a game like that can let you see how it happens, how it unfolds from a more macroscopic perspective, one that somebody who's just living day-to-day life wouldn't necessarily get. But then coming back to day-to-day life, one sees all of these technologies in their everyday instantiation, and one realizes, well, I'm a part of this world that is developing along certain trajectories of progress, and those trajectories may be different depending on what human beings decide to do and how human beings decide to view the future and what technologies they decide to develop. So I think that's something that even very young kids can take away from this discussion. A lot of emerging technologies offer ways of visualizing, conceptualizing open-ended dynamic systems in ways that haven't historically been as available. So now, since we've come to our 90-minute mark, I would like to do two things. First of all, I'd like to read a comment from one of our viewers from the Philippines on the YouTube page for the video, and this video is going to be made available on YouTube after the recording is complete. His name is Nino Pedida. He says, just a quick thought for me to make people become optimists in technology is to share our knowledge, because here in my country, many people still lack knowledge about technology because of education. And for me, the internet is one of the major things that can help in sharing knowledge about technology. I wanted to share this comment because it's a good perspective from another part of the world where most people don't yet have the extent of access to technology that we do, and just spreading that access to technology could help people in the Philippines and in a lot of other countries adopt a more techno-positive, techno-optimistic point of view. So now I would like to invite all of you to make closing remarks, really comment on anything that you've heard here, or any further thoughts that you might have on the question of techno-optimism and how more people could embrace it.
Well, I would like to give everyone as a closing remark to remember that there's not one paradigm, there's not one system, one methodology that works on everyone. I would like to suggest to everyone to look to who you're talking, who your audience is, and adapt your way of persuasion to these people. You know, like if you talk to a religious person or someone with a high academic background or someone who doesn't have any kind of education, you need to apply different methods and you need to pick your battles wisely. You need to see how much will this person affect, you know, the technological growth. And one other thing I would like to say is that many people are, you know, like waiting for the future, but waiting isn't enough. We need to make it happen, and we need to look at how we can contribute. We need to actually look at how we are going to get the resources, the money, you know, try to get rich, try to get influential, try to do something. That's what I would like to share with our viewers.
Yes, very good insights, Demian. Thank you very much. Let's see, Philippe, do you have some closing comments?
Yes, actually, I wanted to say almost the exact same thing Damian said, so I would just add a small thing that if you, one thing that is really important to keep in mind is that we have to be open-minded. So regarding any situation, for example, even life extension, if we state from the start that no, overpopulation is not a problem, no, this is not a problem, we lose the ability to convince someone. And when I say it's not just about convincing someone, we also, as transhumanists, have to consider the problems that might come from these different technologies. So technology in itself and science in itself are neither good or bad at on their foundation. It depends how we use it. There's always a chance that some technology will go wrong. So I think that to keep in mind that some technologies might go wrong, and to agree with the people that state these statements is something very important for sharing our optimism about science.
I definitely agree that technologies can be used in both beneficial and destructive ways. Nuclear energy is an excellent example. You could use it to provide amazingly cheap and efficient and safe power to individuals and businesses, or you can use it to destroy entire cities and possibly the world. So I do agree it's important to achieve a future where technology is used to improve human lives, and I think a techno-optimistic attitude goes a long way toward getting more people to work for that future. So let's see. Lawrence, do you have some closing remarks that you would like to offer?
Well, yes. I would encourage everyone to, when they're speaking to someone, to find what those people are actually worried about with technology, what they see as the negative sides to technology, and in which ways it could go wrong according to them, and to also try and come up with creative solutions in which technology could actually be actually offer a positive solution in those scenarios that of which they think that it could go the wrong way. That would be my closing remark, to try and tackle each problem individually and not try to convince everyone on one point, or to try and convince everyone that technology will be good because of a few reasons that would apply to everyone.
And there's definitely a lot of room for many individuals to essentially pick areas of specialization if they want to promote a certain kind of technology, a certain technological approach, and its merits for solving certain problems. That in itself could be a very involved endeavor. It could require a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of effort in popularizing the ideas, but that just means anybody listening to this has their work cut out for them. Anybody listening to this can contribute something, and we can't have too many people, essentially, no matter how many people participate in the endeavor to change the culture and help advance a hopeful view of certain technologies, we still, I think, won't have enough people, or we won't reach a saturation point. There will always be room for more to engage in this kind of activity. Rowan, do you have some closing remarks?
Yes, I think what we need to do to help restore people's optimism is a lot of these the best qualities that can help us, I think, are childlike qualities. Like, just think about children fear death. That's just one example of a childlike quality we need to restore in humanity. Children, even anger, like a child, a tantrum. In a way, I think humanity needs to have a tantrum about death and aging, right? It's like the cover of your book, Gennady. Death is wrong. You know, that kid's kind of having this turmoil, right? So we need to restore a lot of our childlike qualities. Creativity. We need to start imagining, being creative, using our creative faculties and our imagination and thinking about what's possible, what we could do with our future, and giving people hope. There's so many childlike qualities, even just honesty. I think so much of the problem is, as a childlike quality, right, honesty, so much of the problem is people not being honest about the horrible situation that we're in, right? The nightmare. I call it the nightmare reality, that 100,000 people are dying every day from aging. Like, this is a nightmare. We need to be honest about it, that childlike honesty. And even like something like children are thought of as being selfish, right? There's this kind of selfish nature to children. I think even that can be a positive quality we need to restore in humanity, because we've been fed this idea of altruism to the extent of sacrificing your own life for the greater good of humanity. Like when people mention, they often give cite the trope overpopulation for why they wouldn't want to cure aging. And to me, that person, anyone who says they wouldn't want to live forever because of overpopulation, they are essentially, they don't have enough selfishness. They're willing to sacrifice their own existence for the sake of a less populated world, right? Like, they don't have enough selfishness. So there's so many childlike qualities, I think, that can be that can be harnessed, and that's part of the reason I like Tinkerbell as a character, because she's like a childlike figure, and it stands for so much childlike qualities. And even just kindness, goodness, doing good to other people, all of that is something we need to restore in humanity. Because, like I said, I think the main reason a lot of people don't want to live forever is because they have a secret, they wouldn't admit this to you, but they have a secret self-hatred of themselves, because they are not living to their true potential, or they're not living to their moral excellence, or they're not aspiring to be their best person, you know, that they can be. Or so even if they helped other people and they focused on a less selfish existence and helping the world, they would love themselves more, and in turn they would want to survive more, right? It's that survival instinct, that fighting spirit, the childlike nature we need to restore to humanity. And that's my closing remarks.
Excellent closing remarks, Rowan, and I agree with you. I am an individualist and a rational egoist in terms of my moral persuasion. I do not ever endorse individuals sacrificing themselves for an abstract ideal, whether it be to prevent an alleged problem like overpopulation, or, say, to sacrifice their lives for a country or a god, or the proletariat, or what have you. I think that is a destructive path, not just for oneself, but for the world in totality. I will also say to you, Rowan, I try to live my life so that the 5-year-old me would be proud and understanding of the decisions that I've made, and I think that's a good maxim for all human beings to embrace. And Death is Wrong, I'll show the cover once again. It talks about how at the age of 5 I essentially made a vow that I would fight death my entire life, and I would never stop fighting against death. And I have tried to adhere to that. and I am going to try to adhere to that, and hopefully my book will inspire more children to make that same vow and to live that way. So thank you very much for your comments. Now let's close with Sylvester and his concluding thoughts.
First of all, we must recognize that although knowledge is important, I think what's way more important than knowledge is just imagination. I mean, if you have the capacity to imagine something, to fantasize, to theorize, or to create a vision of a better world, that's more important to know all the ins and outs, to know all the how-to-dos and all the scientific literature. I think that is the most important. The kids needs to be motivated again to be imaginative. You know, to see it in their vision a better world. I think if the technology is available, we can cure suffer. We can have a better well-being. We can enhance intelligence, and we can have longevity, or say the least, eternal life. But we just have to imagine it first. Mm-hmm. And if we imagine it, then we can apply it. And also, it's true. Some technology goes the wrong way. For instance, I have look at automobiles, cars. They have the how you say that the stuff that comes out of the back of the car.
Exhaust.
Yes, that is not healthy to breathe in, you know. But with imagination, we now go into the electric car age. So Imagine will give us solutions for every problem. That's what I believe.
Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. And it's interesting. You're absolutely correct. Anytime a technology is introduced, there are some side effects. Some of those side effects may be harmful to people. More generally, with automobiles get involved in accidents. People can get injured or die in automobile accidents. But the solution to those problems is still more technology, better technology. You mentioned the electric cars. I will also mention self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles that can greatly reduce the occurrence of accidents and save a lot of lives. The solution is not to reject cars or go back to horse-drawn carriages or just travel by foot by everybody, because that could cost more lives in terms of lost opportunities or other negative consequences of a more primitive lifestyle. So I really appreciate all of the comments that everybody has provided. I think the role of imagining the possibilities and having a childlike appreciation of life and some of the virtues that a lot of people actually do have early on in life until some negative experiences or, let's say, defeatist thinking drums those virtues out of them. It's very important to regain those for a lot of people. So I would say my closing recommendation for everybody watching this: spend a bit of time today or in the near future just imagining what a better future would look like. How would that world differ from our own? What would that world have in it that we don't? How could you live in that better future and lead a more fulfilled life than you do right now? And then the next step, imagine and start formulating some plans about what you can do to help us get there. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of your time, and I bid you all farewell.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
There's one more